You're a young knight named Marcus, barely 22, and you've just inherited your uncle's massive stone fortress after he died in a hunting accident. The royal messenger delivered the news along with a heavy iron key that feels like it weighs more than your sword. From the outside, this place looks like every medieval fantasy you've ever dreamed of: towering walls that seem to scrape the clouds, impressive battlements where you can imagine yourself surveying your domain, arrow slits that promise epic battles against rival lords. You're thinking this is your ticket to everything: glory, power, respect, maybe even attracting that merchant's daughter from the village who's been playing hard to get. Your friends back at court are already calling you Lord Marcus with a mixture of envy and admiration. You've got plans, big plans. First, you'll renovate the Great Hall, throw some legendary feasts, maybe host a tournament to show off your new status. But here's the plot twist nobody tells you about. The moment winter hits, this dream castle becomes your worst nightmare. And Marcus is about to learn why experienced knights sometimes preferred sleeping in muddy trenches during winter campaigns over. Returning to their own supposedly luxurious bedrooms, Marcus discovers this the hard way on his first January night. He's spent weeks arranging his new life perfectly. Servants unpacked his belongings in the master chamber. The Great Hall is set for his first feast as lord, and he's even sent invitations to neighboring nobles to show off his inheritance. He's got new tapestries hung, fresh rushes on the floors, and he's planning to serve imported wine that cost him 3 months' income. Then the temperature drops like a stone falling into a well. The first sign something's wrong comes at dinner. Marcus is hosting his inaugural feast, trying to impress a local baron whose daughter he's been courting. The Great Hall looks magnificent, dozens of candles flickering, the massive hearth roaring with flames, servants scurrying about with steaming platters. But halfway through the meal, Marcus notices something disturbing. The wine in his goblet isn't just cool, it's developing a thin skin of ice. Marcus learns the first brutal lesson when he casually leans against the wall during dinner, trying to look casual and lordly. The stone doesn't just feel cold, it burns, with an icy fire that goes straight through his finest tunic, through his silk undershirt, right to his bones. His hand jerks back like he touched molten metal, except this metal has been frozen for months and won't warm up until spring arrives, if it ever does. The servants who've lived through this before watch with knowing looks. They've seen new lords make this mistake. They've watched nobles learn the hard way that touching the wall with your bare hand burns with an icy fire that leaves invisible wounds. Sleep against it, and you'll wake up sick with a cough that won't leave until April. If you wake up at all. But here's where it gets really wild. The Great Hall, that majestic space designed to impress visiting lords and host grand feasts, becomes a death trap. Marcus had imagined himself holding court here, dispensing justice from a carved wooden throne, entertaining guests with elaborate dinners featuring roasted peacock and honeycakes. Instead, he's discovering that trying to heat this space is like trying to warm a cathedral with a single campfire while the doors are standing wide open. The massive hearth in the center, big enough for a man to stand upright inside, burns constantly. Servants feed it logs the size of tree trunks, entire oak branches that would heat a peasant's hut for a week. The flames reach maybe 6 feet before surrendering to the void above. Your feet might be warm, but your head's freezing. The vaulted ceiling, designed to inspire awe, swallows heat like a hungry monster that's never satisfied, no matter how much fuel you sacrifice to it. Marcus watches his breath form clouds in his own dining room. The expensive wine in his goblet develops a skin of ice if he doesn't drink it fast enough. The wax candles burn slower because even they're cold. The servants start hanging every piece of fabric they can find, not for decoration but for survival. Tapestries, old cloaks, grain sacks, even discarded horse blankets become makeshift insulation, creating a patchwork of desperate warmth-seeking that makes the Grand Hall look like a refugee camp. The floors are another nightmare Marcus didn't anticipate. Those impressive massive stone slabs, fitted together by master craftsmen to last centuries, have tiny gaps between them. These gaps, invisible in summer, become highways for Arctic air, creating invisible rivers of cold that flow through the castle like a network of frozen streams carrying winter directly to your feet. Walking barefoot means instant frostbite. Even wearing thick leather boots lined with wool, the cold creeps up through your soles like invisible snakes, climbing your legs inch by inch, working its way toward your core. Marcus finds himself unconsciously dancing from foot to foot, bizarre medieval jig performed by everyone trying to keep circulation going, from the lowliest scullery maid to visiting knights. Here's the crazy part. Marcus discovers that medieval castle life becomes a deadly game of musical chairs with warm spots. Everyone's constantly moving, seeking those precious few feet near the fire. The center of rooms, abandoned wastelands where even the dogs refuse to go. The corners, deadly cold zones where moisture collects and drafts converge like Arctic rivers, meeting at a frozen delta. Marcus starts mapping his castle not by rooms and corridors but by temperature zones. There's the survivable zone within 3 feet of any fire, prime real estate, where only the most important people can claim space. The bearable zone another 2 feet out, where you can function for short periods beyond that. The death with zone where servants only venture when absolutely necessary. Moving quickly like soldiers crossing a battlefield, never lingering, never pausing. The social hierarchy starts reorganizing around these thermal realities. The Lord's chair isn't positioned for the best view of the hall, it's placed in the optimal heat zone. Seating arrangements at dinner aren't about rank anymore, they're about survival. The knight who saved your life in battle might outrank the cook, but if the cook knows how to bank coals properly, guess who gets the warmer seat? Windows become the enemy in ways Marcus never imagined. No glass, just open holes sealed with whatever they can find. Stretched animal bladders that let in sickly yellow light. Wooden shutters that block out the day entirely. Sometimes just boards nailed over openings like the castle is being boarded up for abandonment. The few windows with any transparency are made from scraped horn or thin sheets of mica that make everything look like you're viewing the world through cloudy water. Daylight becomes a luxury they can't afford because every ray of sun comes with a blast of winter air. Marcus finds himself living like a vampire, conducting business by candlelight, never seeing the sun for weeks at a time. The few windows left partially open are stuffed with moss, rags, even dead animals, anything to plug the gaps where winter tries to crawl inside. The irony isn't lost on Marcus. He's living in a fortress designed to keep enemies out, but the greatest enemy is already inside, and it came through the very openings meant to provide light and air. Every architectural feature that seemed impressive in autumn becomes a liability in winter. The sleeping situation gets desperate faster than Marcus could have imagined. He'd pictured himself in the master bedroom, alone with his thoughts and plans, maybe entertaining occasional female company. Instead, he finds himself sharing beds with servants. Not from any social revolution or progressive ideals, but pure survival math. Body heat is currency and hoarding it means death. 3. People under one fur covering isn't intimate, it's strategic. The knight who saved his life in battle. The cook who knows which corners stay warmest. Even the stable boy who generates heat like a furnace. They all become bedmates in this stone fortress turned communal survival shelter. Privacy becomes a luxury nobody can afford. Dogs aren't pets, they're living, breathing heating systems. Marcus finds himself fighting the castle cats for the right to sleep with the largest hounds. These animals become so valuable that harming one is almost treasonous. A good dog at your feet can mean the difference between waking up stiff or not waking up at all. The castle's massive wolfhounds, bred for hunting and protection, become the most pampered creatures in the fortress. The social hierarchy starts crumbling under the weight of thermal reality. The lowliest scullery maid who knows how to bank coals properly becomes more valuable than a knight who can't figure out how to stay warm. Knowledge of heat becomes the new nobility. The old woman who knows how to wrap heated stones without burning. The bedding suddenly finds herself advising lords on survival techniques. Food becomes fuel, literally. Everything hot, fatty and spicy goes into the belly like coal into a furnace. Hot porridge isn't breakfast, it's internal central heating. Spiced wine isn't a luxury, it's liquid warmth that might keep your blood moving another hour. The kitchen staff become the most important people in the castle, more crucial than guards or advisors. Marcus watches his cook transform from a simple food preparer into a survival strategist. Every meal is planned around internal warming. Fat is hoarded like gold, bacon, grease, beef, tallow. Even the oil from cooking fish becomes precious. Spices become medicine, not flavoring. Pepper, ginger, cinnamon, anything that makes you feel warm from the inside becomes worth more than silver. The kitchen, with its constantly burning ovens, becomes the most important room in the castle, more crucial than the armory, more valuable than the treasury. Marcus finds himself spending more time there than in his own chamber. Not because he enjoys cooking, but because it's the only place where he can think clearly without his thoughts being interrupted by chattering teeth. The castle transforms into a human hive. Dozens of people clustered in the kitchen, the only room with consistent heat. Privacy disappears completely. Personal space becomes a death sentence. The smell of unwashed bodies mixed with smoke and wet wool fills every corner, but nobody complains, because that smell means life, warmth, human presence in a world that's trying to freeze you to death. Marcus realizes the terrifying truth in his impregnable fortress. The greatest enemy isn't outside the walls. It's the walls themselves. The very thing protecting him from arrows and siege engines is slowly trying to kill him with cold. His inheritance isn't a prize. It's a beautiful trap designed by people who understood warfare but maybe didn't fully grasp the physics of thermodynamics. Portable braziers become more valuable than gold. These small metal bowls filled with burning coals get carried from room to room like sacred flames, too dangerous to leave unattended because they can spill and start fires that would burn down the entire castle. Too precious to live without because they're the only mobile heat source that can make a room temporarily habitable. Marcus learns to read the signs, the color of the coals, the smell of the smoke, the way the metal glows. He becomes a fire tender, a skill no knight training ever taught him. His sword arm grows strong from carrying braziers, not from combat practice. His hands become skilled at banking coals, not wielding weapons. The architecture that seems so impressive starts making sense through the lens of survival. Those narrow twisting staircases aren't just for defense, they're wind. Every turn disrupts the flow of cold air. Every twist creates a pocket where warmth might collect. The spiral design that makes it hard for enemies to rush upward also makes it hard for winter to rush through. Those thick walls aren't just protection, they're thermal mass, slowly releasing whatever heat they manage to absorb during the brief hours when fires burn hot. The castle becomes a giant stone battery, storing and releasing energy in a constant battle against entropy. But like any battery, it takes massive amounts of energy to charge and holds. The charge for frustratingly short periods. Small rooms within larger halls become survival pods. Fabric screens create microenvironments where a single candle can actually make a difference. The castle doesn't get heated, it gets divided into tiny, manageable warm spots connected by frozen corridors that people sprint through, holding their breath, racing from one pocket of warmth to another. Marcus discovers that his ancestors weren't just building for war, they were building for survival. Every architectural choice has thermal implications. Room placement, door orientation, even the height of ceilings, all designed by people who understood that winter was a 6-month siege that never lifted, never negotiated, never showed mercy. By February, Marcus understands something that would shock modern people. Medieval castle life wasn't about conquest and glory. It was about surviving until spring in a beautiful stone prison that nature was constantly trying to reclaim. Every day was a victory against the elements. Every sunrise was a small miracle that meant you'd made it through another night. The servants know secrets passed down through generations: which corners stay warmest longest, how to arrange furniture to block drafts, where to place a brazier for maximum effect, how to sleep in full clothing without suffocating, how to wrap stones heated by the fire and use them as bed warmers without burning the bedding or yourself. They know which foods generate the most internal heat, which fabrics trap air most effectively, which sleeping positions conserve body warmth. They know how to read the signs of frostbite, how to treat someone whose body temperature has dropped too low, how to keep someone alive when their lips turn blue and their speech becomes slurred. This knowledge is more valuable than any military strategy, more crucial than any diplomatic skill. The servant who knows how to keep a fire burning all night without using too much wood becomes more important than the knight who can swing a sword. The old woman who can predict weather patterns becomes more valuable than the clerk who can read Latin. As winter deepens, Marcus becomes a student of survival. He learns to read the castle's moods when the wind patterns shift, when the drafts change direction, when the stones reach their coldest point just before dawn. He develops an almost supernatural awareness of temperature variations, able to sense a degree's difference just by walking into a room. He learns that certain times of day are more dangerous than others. The hour before dawn, when the stones have been releasing cold all night and the fires are at their lowest, becomes a time when people die in their sleep. The afternoon, when the winter sun might briefly warm the south-facing walls, it becomes a precious opportunity to gather in those rooms and absorb whatever heat the stones might release. The most chilling realization: this isn't some primitive struggle, this is advanced medieval technology. These castles represent the pinnacle of 12th century engineering, the best minds, the finest craftsmen, the most advanced understanding of architecture and defense. And they're still barely livable when nature decides to fight back. The greatest minds of the age created these monuments, and winter still nearly defeats them. Marcus survives his first winter, but barely. He emerges in spring with a new respect for the peasants who chose their drafty wooden huts over stone fortresses. Sometimes the strongest shelter is the one that bends with the storm instead of fighting it. Sometimes survival means accepting defeat and adapting. Sometimes the most impressive fortress is actually the most dangerous place to be. The castle stands proud and impregnable, ready to defend against any human enemy. But every winter it loses the same battle against the one opponent that never retreats, never negotiates, and never shows mercy. Winter doesn't care about your bloodline, your title, or your stone walls. It doesn't care about your military victories or your political alliances. It only cares about physics, and physics always wins. That's the real medieval truth in a world where survival meant everything. The greatest threat wasn't war or plague. It was the simple, relentless cold that turned humanity's greatest architectural achievements into elaborate traps. The very symbols of power and protection became prisons of ice and desperation where the strong died alongside the weak. Marcus learns that true nobility isn't about commanding armies or holding grand feasts. It's about keeping your people alive through the killing months, about sharing warmth instead of hoarding it, about understanding that survival is a collective effort where everyone's knowledge matters and everyone's body heat counts. By the time spring arrives, Marcus has become a different person. The young knight who thought castle ownership meant power and prestige has become a survival expert who understands that real strength comes from community, knowledge, and the ability to adapt to circumstances beyond your control. If you want to discover more brutal truths about how our ancestors really lived, hit that subscribe button. Because history isn't just about kings and battles, it's about the daily struggles that would break most of us today. The human stories behind the stone walls. and the incredible ingenuity it took just to see another sunrise in a world that was constantly trying to kill you.